encountered a couple very evil people. The scariest were the ones who were attractive and polite/funny, but when they looked at me, I could just feel that I was nothing but prey. What's a creepy, remote, or otherwise off-limits place you have or do would like to explore? I'm from Salt Lake City. It's been torn down now I think, but in high school kids would go to Ted Bundy's house. I wasn't allowed to go, and the older I get, the more grateful I am for that. In Bolivia there's a town called Quim. There's no longer used mines there. I went there just to wander around the mountains, and when I came across a mine entrance, I decided to take a look. I got about 5 steps in, I was unbelievably creeped out and I don't know why. I've never been anywhere so silent. Just a feeling of imminent doom. Have you ever met a person who radiated evil? What were they like? Worked in a couple prisons. Out of the standard population, about 1 to 3% I would consider genuinely evil. Deep evil, like an evil spirit exists inside them, and is encouraging them to lash out, and use its power. I remember every single one of them as well, unforgettable presences. Family member of mine. Born evil. Charming, highly intelligent, but if she sees weakness or any power over you, the real demon comes out. She has sky blue eyes which stare menacingly, but when in a rage, her pupils dilate so much, her eyes turn black. Anyway, she sucks and is going to prison now, so there's that. What's an experience you've had that you can't explain with logic? Around 1999 in Phoenix, Arizona, my dad was leaving for work around 4 a.m. He pulled us out of bed and took us outside to look at the sky. It was the strangest thing I've seen in all my life, as it looked like all the stars in the sky were all grouped together into a much smaller amoeba shape. Like all the stars we so closely packed together, and absolute nothingness surrounding the odd-shaped cluster of stars. It was like looking into a portal into some other part of the universe. I had a third-person experience when I was young. It was weird, as I was in the eyes of the person I was talking to. I saw I had a smudge on my face that I hadn't noticed, and checked in a mirror after, and it was there. What is the scariest theory known to man? A sufficiently advanced AI would be capable of keeping itself hidden until it chooses otherwise. A wandering star could come near our solar system and pull Earth out of its orbit, throwing it into the dark unknown, freezing the entire planet to absolute zero. The sheer size of the universe. Once you dive in how unimaginable the size of everything is, our solar system looks like an atom compared to everything else. Personally, I'm terrified of the theory about there being nothing after death. Just floating in darkness, no reincarnation, nothing. What is a fact you know off the top of your head, preferably disturbing, that you probably shouldn't know? Humans, being mostly carbon, can be made into diamonds. I plan to go the cheaper route and have my ashes be rolled into a glass paperweight. Someday I might even end up on the shelf of a Goodwill for $2.99. Doctors removed the eyes of Jack the Ripper's last known victim in order to check if they could extract an image of the killer. What made you realize someone you knew was actually completely effed in the head? When she lied for 9 months that she was pregnant, and on the day of her due date she flipped out, and revealed that she was never pregnant. She didn't want her boyfriend to leave her, and she just kept on with the lie. And now she hates me because I've removed myself from her life. My now former buddy tried to make his new wife stick her hand in the garbage disposal, while he held his finger on the switch as a test of trust. He became crazy mad when she refused, claiming she didn't trust him. He then wanted me to do it to show her how trust works. Note right out of there, and cut that dude off cold turkey. They got divorced within the year. What's the creepiest thing that's happened to you at work? Found a pic of me on the printer. The original picture included me and my spouse, but this version had him cropped out, and was zoomed in a way where I can only think of it having a single purpose. What made it extra creepy is that I had removed that picture from my social media account years ago, and it didn't exist anywhere else online, so the person must have had it saved on their computer for quite a while. My boss took the picture of me and my ex-husband on a ski trip, and photoshopped his face onto my ex-husband and tried to give it to me. He then tried to invite me to Jamaica. Should have never sold him that condo. Cave explorers of Reddit, what's the closest you've ever come to dying? I'm no cave explorer, but I do know of a small cave behind a waterfall. I was hanging out in there, and suddenly the whole thing was being filled with water. I crawled out, but if I was any less physically capable, I don't think I would have made it, because the water pressure was too great and was sucking me to the back of the cave and pinning me down.
In the summer, I was spending the night at my cousin's house. She's only 3 years older than me, and we would spend a lot of time together. Anyways, around 2 or 3 in the morning, we made a plan to sneak out of her house and take a walk around the neighborhood. About 30 minutes pass and we finally sneak out. When we get to the gate at the front of her house, I realized there was someone walking in the middle of the road with a limp, wearing a hoodie. His eyes locked with mine, and a creepy smile was on his face. I told her, "There's someone there, looking at us." She didn't believe me until she saw for herself. We quickly jumped her fence to her backyard and went inside. To this day, I'm thankful we didn't go for that walk.
What's legal, but if you do it, you still look like a psychopath. Wearing the skin of a roast chicken like a mask. Stop responding midway through in conversation, but maintain eye contact. Instead of holding the door open, especially at a restaurant with dual double doors, you close them right after you enter/exit the building. Wearing a wedding gown to someone else's wedding. My boss used to apply his lip balm while making firm eye contact with me at the end of the day. Used to creep me out, and I'm still unsure why he did it like that. What's something that's worse than death? Being sane and committed to a mental ward for life, but no one believes you. Watching someone die slowly. Something taking them slowly every day, turning them into someone you don't recognize. Dying. Death isn't horrifying to me, it's the prospect of suffering before I do that chills me to the bone. Being in a vegetative state. Cannot bear to imagine a life where you're aware of your surroundings, but you can't do anything about it, besides being trapped in your own thoughts. People who have unfriended their childhood friend/best friend, what happened? I haven't unfriended her yet, but I'm basically at the point where I'm sick of her drama, pettiness and main character syndrome. Anything that doesn't go her way is taken personally, and if you disagree with her, or even have a preference that differs from hers, she will berate you into submission and agreement. And heaven forbid you have a life that doesn't consider her wants and desires. We're both 30, almost 31. I'm too old for that crap. What's the scariest or strangest thing you've seen in a national park or national forest? A pair of female cops fishing a pond with a grappling hook on a line, trying to drag in an arm that was sticking out of the murk. I saw a large, deep, rectangular pit in the middle of a national forest. It looked like someone was about to be buried. I carefully walked away as quietly as I could, afraid I'd fall into a different pit with a body in it. The mind can play some mean tricks on a person. What's the biggest F up the new guy did? It was me. I was the new guy. On my second day working at Domino's, I spilled an entire maybe 10-pound bag of pepperoni on the floor. I don't know if you know this, but pepperoni is really expensive, even in bulk. I had to sweep it up in full view of all the customers. The manager on shift, thankfully the chill one, told me that I was lucky the boss was away at the time because he would have fired me on the spot. On the day a newish coworker got his forklift license, he proceeded to drive between two parts of the warehouse with the fork up. Straight through the drywall and all the crap in between. License revoked on the spot. What are some things that people aren't scared enough about, that they should really be scared of? Current technologies, like those home security cameras and locks that are linked to Wi-Fi. Schizophrenia. Honestly. You can live an entirely normal life into adulthood, and then have a rapid onset, and you likely wouldn't even realize. In the 9 months it took people to realize something was wrong with my now husband, he absolutely destroyed his life, long-term relationship, and racked up a felony. Bad breakups and the trauma they can cause. Should the shock be sufficient, the human mind can suffer lasting, even permanent neural damage that decreases cognitive capabilities and inflammation across the board.
Truck drivers, what's a creepy story you've got from the middle of nowhere? Parked off an exit ramp at about 3 a.m. for my 10 hour. The moon was full and high, and I spotted an unmistakably human figure in a nearby cut cornfield. A little spooky, but I wrote it off as an old-timer putting up a scarecrow for the grandkids. Started watching a few YouTube videos, and out of the corner of my eye I thought I saw movement. I shut my lights off to get a good look. Saw a figure, but nothing else. I couldn't be sure, but it looked like maybe it was in a different spot, maybe even a little closer. I was definitely feeling a bit spooked. Highway was devoid of anyone besides a car passing every 10 minutes or so. I didn't want to, but I had to jump out to pee. I considered a bottle, but I told myself I was being childish. I took a look at the figure, and it was right where I figured it should be. I hop out, walk between my truck and trailer, and start leaking. Every fiber of my being wanted to look. I told myself again I was being foolish, but I couldn't help it. I looked out. The field was empty. The figure wasn't there. My stomach dropped. I pinched off and jumped back in. I took off down the highway, didn't give one crap about a violation. Stopped 40 minutes up the road at a very well lit and very full Love's. Haven't stopped on a ramp since.
Truckers of Reddit, what is something you have witnessed driving at night that gave you chills? There's another driver where I work that tells a story about driving through the desert in Arizona, back in the 80s, with nothing around for miles, when he broke down in the middle of the night. It was an easy fix. His fuel filter was clogged. He drained it a little to free up the fuel and got the truck running about 15 minutes later. Then, he took off down the highway. As he was driving, he saw a man that was out of breath on the side of the highway that was staring at him as he passed. He said it looked like the guy had been running toward him, until he got his truck running and drove away. He said if he had been there a few more minutes, the guy would have been able to walk up on him with his head in the engine bay. He said the look on the guy's face gave him chills, and when telling the story you could see it still creeped him out. People that have walked through a forest at night and experienced a scary moment, what happened? When my friends were about 14 or so, they walked up into the woods behind our buddy's house. After walking out into the wilderness for probably half an hour, they came across a well-kept, red-headed man. Without saying a word, he began walking at them, and proceeded to chase them for about 2 miles all the way back out of the woods. Once they got back into the clearing, he just turned around and walked back up into the wilderness. Truck drivers, what's a creepy story you've got from the middle of nowhere? My friend drove for a few years a while back. He told me he was driving a rig very late at night in Utah, driving on a lesser-used 2-lane highway. He said he remembers feeling very alert that night, so he noticed what appeared to be a figure manifesting up ahead on the dark road. Told me it wasn't on the road, but just next to it. He then comes to a stop and grabs his heavy-duty flashlight and points it at the figure. He then describes it. Apparently this humanoid creature had a dead coyote it was eating, and the truck had gotten its attention and pissed it off. So it sorta stands up so he can get a full view of the thing. It was Guant, with very big eyes, and of course the coyote blood all over its face. Its height was about 6 feet 2, it had skinny limbs, no clothing. He then describes how it started to shuffle slowly towards the truck. Not only does he not have a weapon at that time, the only usable weapon being his flashlight, is actively helping him view this creature. He decides to book it and leave. Had no problem passing it. Turned around to see it standing in the middle of the road on 2 legs as he drove away. When he reaches the nearest rest stop, he sees 2 other truckers talking. Apparently my friend wasn't the only one to see the thing. Both the 2 guys looked as horrified as he was. As for my opinion on my friend's encounter, I have to say, my friend isn't one to lie. So his story had me intrigued. I told him maybe what he saw was some mentally ill person out there, but he brushed the idea off saying he knew what he saw wasn't human. I'm not the superstitious type, but his story really did creep me out. What is a local myth/folk tale that gives you the creeps? A decommissioned offshore lighthouse. Even though the tower is locked, and all utilities have long been disconnected, residents viewing it from the shore have witnessed the beacon lighting up randomly late at night, 2 to 3 times per year. The structure remains solidly locked, and no boats have been reported in the area when the sporadic illumination occurs. The Sawney Bean Tale. I couldn't sleep without a light on for a full week because it was so traumatizing. I recommend not looking it up if you have a weak stomach. What convinced you paranormal activity actually occurs/is real? I went to an old graveyard in my hometown that was supposedly haunted. I didn't totally believe it, until I went inside the gate and the flashlights, camera, and phone all stopped working, and it got very cold. It was in the middle of summer. Once I walked back outside the gate, my camera worked, but the flash did not. I took some photos, and when I looked over them when I got home, there were weird green flashes of light and orbs in the photos, even though they were taken in the pitch black of night. What's the creepiest thing that's happened to you at work? Posted this before, but hey, it still creeps me out. I used to do advertising for Honda motorcycles. For one of their anniversaries, they decided to take a group photo of every pro rider that had ever ridden for Honda. My art director partner helped put it together, so he hung a poster of the shot on his cubicle wall. It hung there for years. One day we learned that one of the riders had died in a fire the night before. We were discussing it, when suddenly a push pin popped out and the poster fell to the ground. We immediately stopped talking about the rider. Truck drivers of Reddit, what is the creepiest thing that has happened to you while on the job? Not a truck driver, but my dad is. One day, 2 years ago, I hadn't got school, so he decided to make me go to work with him to keep him company. He had to travel to another city about 45 kilometers from where we live. To get to this city, you have to pass a road in the countryside with not a single soul around. So, while he was driving, I was looking outside the truck windows, when I saw something so creepy. There was a woman staring at us standing in a field. I decided to concentrate on the music coming from the radio. Later that day, the news reports that a woman who escaped the prison had been arrested again. I realized that I saw that woman. Serious, police, security guards, paramedics, etc. Have you ever been called out only to realize it was a seemingly paranormal incident? What happened? I work security at night in a luxury condo. I actually started a little over a month ago, and I already have a fair share of incidents. Alarms triggered for no apparent reason, finding unusual doors unlocked, random orbs on the cameras, door slamming while nobody's around, and elevator phones started ringing by itself. Long-haul truckers and road trippers, what's the creepiest thing you've encountered on the road? Back in 2003, I was with my roommates and their band on tour through California to Texas. We were just outside of El Paso, Texas at 3 a.m. on the freeway. I saw two young girls in ethereal white flowing gowns in the middle of the freeway while I was driving. I promptly exited to the nearest hotel to stay for the night after seeing that kind of thing. I'm usually a major skeptic, but no matter how you twist it, I can't figure out any logical explanation for the same car repeatedly passing you every 40 minutes on an 8-hour drive from Albuquerque to Oklahoma City. Very strange. When had you dodged death, but only realized it in hindsight? When I was a kid, like 7 or 8 year old, me and my friend were walking on ice of the river. The ice broke under my feet, and I probably would have died without my friend's help. When you are a young kid, you don't realize how easily you can drown from that, get pulled down because of the current. When I was 13, my brother pulled me back from stepping off the curb. As I spun around to face him, I felt the truck whiz by and the wind blow my hair. Truly and sincerely, it didn't really dawn on me until I was older that he really saved my life. What is your scariest home alone story? The other night I'm asleep in my apartment, I hear my front door open, but just figure it's my sister coming over to crash on my couch because she got in a fight with her boyfriend. Happens sort of regularly. She's the only one with a key to my apartment. I heard her moving around and figured she was just getting settled and making something to eat. I go back to sleep and think nothing of it. Wake up the next morning for work, and she's not there. Weird, since it was 5 a.m., so I text and ask if she came over. She says no. I check my doors and the door to the outside I rarely use was left unlocked. Amateur radio operators, what is the creepiest/weirdest thing you've heard on the radio? I was tuning around 4 MHz late one night, and came across a gentle, Mr. Rogers-like voice saying things like, "Daniel. Daniel, can you hear me? There are people here who want to speak with you, Daniel. You need to tell us where you are, we are here to help you." He continued to call Daniel's name but no answer. No call sign, station ID, names or anything, just "Daniel, can you hear me?" At one point, you could hear someone crying in the background. It was very unsettling. Therapists of Reddit, when was a time you felt scared of your patient? People with a mental illness are far, far more likely to victims of crime than commit them. That said, when I was a case manager in my young 20s, it was my job to visit people with serious mental illnesses in their houses. One client we suspected of having sociopathic tendencies, and meeting him alone in his rooms made me uncomfortable enough to refuse our last visit. The way he looked at and talked to me, even when the words were fine, their tone was off. Given his housing setup, I doubt anything would have happened, but I'm pretty sure he was trying to think of ways to make it. When he was brought to my office in handcuffs, with 2 armed escorts, and his face had a screen in front of it so that he couldn't bite. What's the scariest place you've ever been to? I've stayed in multiple haunted hotels and there was a psychic who supposedly talked to spirits, and it was creepy. We were doing a little thing where I was talking to someone I loved who passed away, when a spirit from the hotel butted in and started showing us how she died. She was choking and it felt so draining. I don't know if you believe in that stuff, but I found it scary. An abandoned prison in the middle of nowhere in Ontario. Literally no other buildings around for miles. What is the strangest/creepiest thing that has happened to you, that left you saying, what the hell was that? At the time, I never really thought much of it because of my age. When I was around 8 to 9 years old, we used to live in a semi-detached house where the stairs were by the left side of the house, and the neighbor's home was to the right, important for later. Another important fact was that an old guy used to live there, and unfortunately passed away. I made friends with the neighbor's kids because we realized we went to the same school. One day, I was walking up the stairs whilst knocking my knuckles against the wall playfully, like any child would. I heard something knock back, and at the time I was young, so I assumed it was the neighbor's kid knocking from the other side. I knocked again and heard the wall knock back. It wasn't until I recalled the memory and floor plan that the neighbor's house wasn't aligned with the stairs. The other side of the wall I knocked on was plain land. Night owls of Reddit, what is the creepiest thing that happened to you when everyone else was sleeping? I was in a call with my girlfriend one night a month or so ago, and had fallen asleep. The next morning, she tells me she heard someone walking around on my side of the call, a door closing, and someone talking to me. Apparently, she tried waking me up, even yelling for me to try to get me up, but I was fast asleep. I asked my family the next morning and none of them were awake or in my room at any point that night, so I'm still not sure what she heard. Dear Redditors, what's the most eerie, unsettling thing you've ever encountered while hiking, and or in the woods? Oh boy, I have one. Okay, so me and my family were hiking along a trail during our camping trip, and promptly got lost. In our attempt to get back to the road, we stumbled upon a really weird place, with stick walls, a tarp tent, a deer carcass in a fire pit, a large do not enter sign, and a bunch of other creepy things. We found it odd, but left and went back to the campsite. When we told the family we were staying with, they got really quiet and asked, "But he didn't see you, did he?" We said no, and they were really relieved and said to never go back. They would not elaborate, and just said he was not fond of strangers. Creepy as hell. People who work in a hospital, what are some of the dark secrets of hospitals people don't know? Several people are fired every year for peeking at medical records of celebs, politicians, and other VIPs. This is in spite of those records specifically requiring you to acknowledge a scary reminder about privacy law, and how their actions will be logged and audited. The mega VIPs actually have records under false names for further protection. Sanitation is suspect and is usually done by people who are in a hurry to clean other rooms. Lots of spots get missed between patients. What was your near-death experience? I was going back from mountain trip through a forest during a thunderstorm. Then, all of a sudden, I couldn't see anything, and my ears were ringing. Few seconds later, a gigantic tree with a trunk diameter of something above 1 meter, 3.28 feet, falls. It landed like 2 meters from me. Apparently, lightning struck this tree, causing me to be stunned while the tree fell, which nearly resulted in my death. Car accident. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. I broke my leg, but survived the accident. What is the worst thing you've overheard while pretending to be asleep? Late in the comments here. But I heard the news my dad passed away pretending to sleep. I was 12 at the time, woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Headed to the kitchen to get some water after, and saw my sister sitting on the couch. She asked if I could sleep out in the living room with her, and I didn't think anything of it. Woke up the next morning, and kept my eyes closed. I heard my mom telling my dad's best friend we lost him. I won't forget it. What's your true ghost/paranormal story? When I was about 3 years old, for about 3 months every day, I would wake up to see a mannequin-looking figure with a suit and mustache in my room, looking at me. In the morning, I would tell my parents about it. My parents would get very freaked out about it, as it reminded them of my great-grandpa. A few years later, when I was older, my parents started talking about it again, with me and my sister. My sister would say that she also saw a similar figure in her room when she was very young. What's the scariest experience you have been through? When I was 11, I was with a group of my pals a few streets away from home. A truck drew up and a man coaxed my friend to get in the cab, saying he'd buy her an ice cream. We tried to tell her no, but she was a messed up kid. They drove off to get ice cream and we anxiously waited for her to come back, which she did about 20 minutes later, minus ice cream. I went home and told my parents, who told her parents. They brought me to the police station and I had to give a description of him which was circulated by local newspapers. He was never seen in the area again, but 4 years later, on a Sunday morning, his face was on every newspaper and TV channel in the UK. It was Fred West, the serial killer. To this day, I don't believe he would have brought her back if we hadn't made such a fuss about her getting into a vehicle with a stranger. What is the most supernatural or unexplainable thing that has happened to you? I have had experienced a lot of unexplainable things, but the most by far happened a few years ago. I was sitting on my couch knitting, and behind me is a desk and desk chair. I feel and hear someone running behind me. I turn quickly, thinking it is my kid, but nothing is there, and the desk chair was slightly spinning. I kind of had a moment and looked throughout the house and everything was fine, so I pushed it out of my mind, and continued to knit. Then, from the corner of my eyes, I see this figure staring at me, peering from the side of my couch. I look over and it disappears. It was a little blonde boy with bright, almost glowing blue eyes, and greenish, blue/gray face, and a dark purple smile. What is the creepiest phone call, text message, etc., that you have ever received? Someone wrote their name in the bathroom mirror at my house. I didn't know it was there until it fogged up after a shower. I just got out, and the name Emma was written on the mirror. Thing is, I lived alone at the time and didn't know anyone by that name, and didn't recognize it as a friend of a friend's name either. I don't believe in the paranormal, but I definitely thought I was at the start of a horror movie that night. Unknown number at 2 a.m, looking forward to seeing you. Last time I saw you, you looked delicious. Clearly flirty, but when I was sleep deprived at 2 a.m, it was pretty creepy. What's a really effed up thing you've witnessed as a kid, but didn't realize until you were older? As a kid, I was coming back from Halloween Horror Night, really late at night. I just stared out the window the whole ride home, and I saw a truck with the windshield smashed completely out, and a man sitting very stiff and unnatural in front of it. Now when I pass that same spot, there's a memorial grave marker there, and I realize that man was probably dead through his windshield. My friend had a lock on the outside of her bedroom door. I thought it was weird, but didn't really think much about it. It turned out her parents would literally lock her in her room for long periods of time as punishment. What's your, I don't believe in ghosts, but that was really weird story? Was sitting in my living room late at night once, watching the TV. I had the light on, and the curtains were drawn. A shadow gets up from exactly